We are looking at a gigantic con trick before our eyes. We don't live in a democracy in this country or in America and these other places. We live in a one-party state where the same force from the peak of the pyramid string pulls all sides. The creation of a one-world government to which nation-states would be principalities, administrative units, a world central bank which would administer all financial transactions on the planet, a world currency which wouldn't be coins and notes, it would be merely electronic, cashless society for which there are fundamental implications for freedom, as we'll see as we go along tonight. A world army under centralized control with nation-state armies dismantled under the justification of seeking peace, and a microchipped population linked to a global computer, the latter of which sounds bizarre to many people on first hearing, except that we are ridiculously close to it and the technology already exists. So World Health Organization says there's going to be a measles epidemic next year. Get vaccinated. Get your children vaccinated. You're a bad parent if you don't. Then the same people that organize that then start flogging out the vaccine and make a fortune out of it.
They talked about Pat running for president, and if he did that, I would be very supportive. But he'd have to shake a label that gets assigned to people like Pat who run for the presidency, and that is that he's a tool of the rich. I personally like that very much. My father told me that's the way the system is meant to work. You know, I think Pat's coming quickly. Soon, I think he's going to be in a position for the Trilateral Commission. And if he shows promise beyond that, there's Bilderberg. World control, Pat. Settle for nothing else.
Well, this week, PPP released the findings of a poll of how much Americans believe in conspiracy theories. That's where we got our lizard people numbers from. We also learned that the percentage of Americans who believe that a secret power elite with a globalist agenda is conspiring to eventually rule the world through an authoritarian world government or new world order, that percentage is 28%.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
It is a big idea, a new world order.
So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, a new world is emerging. It is a new world order.
And the hope that each of us has to build a new world order.
We meet here at a moment of testing for Europe and the United States, and for the international order that we have worked for generations to build.
Today, Europe can propose the principles and rules that will shape a new global order. The goal should be to devise a system of global financial governance.
We must treat this new world order, this new world of COVID.
Right now, it's a critical time because we know that we not only fight for Ukraine, we fight for this new world order.
Szanowny Panie Prezydencie, Pani Marszałek, Wysoka Izbo. Na naszych oczach wykuwa się nowy porządek świata.
And the title of this session, are we ready for a new world order?
And those people who have been yelling, oh, the UN's going to take over global
conspiracy theorists.
They've been crazy, but now they're right.
Well, when Geithner said he would be open to the idea of a global currency last week, those conspiracy people had suggested that for years. You're not wrong.
Growing conspiracy following it. It is called the Great Reset.
An unprecedented opportunity to rethink and reset the ways in which we live.
The great opportunity for reset.
In short, we need a great reset.
And the time to act is now.
You have a small elite that pushes things in its own interests, even if it doesn't benefit the vast majority of the population.
Let's also be clear. The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room.
We have business, of course, as a very important audience, and we have politics. We have continuous partnerships with many governments around the world. And of course, we have NGOs, we have trade unions, we have all those different parts.
Media, of course.
Media, of course.
And I have to say, when I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China. Their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime.
So that we penetrate the cabinets.
This debate about privacy versus security is as old as civilization, you can say. But there is something new now. For the first time in history, it's possible to completely eliminate privacy. Mm-hmm. It was just never possible before, and it is possible now. Something fundamental has changed. Mm-hmm. When dictators always dreamt about completely eliminating privacy, monitoring everybody all the time and knowing everything you do, and not just everything you do, but even everything you think and everything you feel. Whether it's a tyrant in ancient Greece or whether it's Stalin, they always dreamt about it. They could never do it because it was technically impossible. Now it's possible.
Can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants, and we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel how the people react to your answers. Is it imaginable?
All you need in order to systematically hack millions of people is just the data. Mm-hmm. That to hack people means to know people better than they know themselves. Right. To somebody in San Francisco, in Beijing, knows you, knows more about you than you know about yourself, about your medical condition, about your mental weaknesses.
Again, maybe I will use an example. I think it's fascinating what's happening in this field right now. I mean, FDA approved the first electronic pill, if I can call it like that. So it is basically biological chip that it is in the tablet. And once you take the tablet and dissolves into your stomach, sends a signal that you took the tablet.
We talked about the incredible opportunities that technology gives us in the future to create the world that we want.
So for any lifting of any lockdown to be successful, we need not only to be able to test healthcare workers, but also to track and trace patients or people.
We have right now 15 member states that have already signed up. And from the 1st of July, all 27 member states have to apply these EU digital certificates for the COVID. I am planning now to start my tour through 27 member states for the Next Generation EU, our Recovery and Resilience plan, and I'm very curious to test and to see how this certificate will work.
80% double dose means we can be freer than what we are today, no doubt about it. But does it mean we forget QR codes? Absolutely not.
I was then, I remain even more convinced today, particularly with biometric technology, the world will move to biometric ID, and they'll do it because in the end it's better for people. Biometric ID is just one part of a much, much bigger picture.
Through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker.
Well, each of these devices that are injection have the capacity to also have a small chip. What that chip does is it has the unique serial number for each dose.
I just would like to highlight what you said about the European Chips Act, because it's a very important step to create the physical brain for digitalization.
If we allow this kind of data
to be accumulated by a few corporations or governments, the result will be really the end of democracy in the free market and the creation of new kinds of totalitarian regimes or total surveillance regimes. In my own home country, in Israel, we have this big laboratory of surveillance called the occupied territories, where you have 2.5 million guinea pigs of how to completely survey and control a population with very few soldiers. I mean, when you look at the numbers, it's amazing how few soldiers you need to control millions of people if you have their data.
So here's all the biology you need to know in 30 seconds. Our body is made out of organs. Our organs are made out of cells. And in every cell, there's this thing called messenger RNA, or mRNA for short, that transmits the critical information from the DNA, our genes, to the protein, which is really the stuff we're all made out of. This is the critical information that determines what a cell will actually do. And so we think of it like an operating system. If you could actually change that, which we call the software of life, if you could introduce a line of code or change a line of code, and I'm here today to tell you that we're actually hacking the software of life.
One final way that's new and is promising is called the RNA vaccine. With RNA and DNA, instead of putting that shape in, you put instructions in the code to make that shape.
Gene editing.
Exactly.
You know, opening a whole new horizon for medical science.
And you see, the difference of this fourth industrial revolution is it doesn't change what you are doing. It changes you. If you take a genetic editing, just as an example, it's you who are changed. And of course, this has a big impact on your identity.
Obviously, we can't just turn off the spigot on the system we have and then say, hey, everyone in the world should get this new vaccine we haven't given to anyone yet. But there must be some way.
In order to make the transition from getting out of the tried and true egg growing, which we know gives us results that can be, beneficial. I mean, we've done well with that, to something that has to be much better. You have to prove that this works, and then you've got to go through all of the clinical trials, phase 1s, phase 2s, phase 3, and then show that this particular product is going to be good over a period of years. That alone, if it works perfectly, is going to take a decade.
There might be a need or even an urgent call for an entity of excitement out there that's completely disruptive, that's not beholden to bureaucratic strings and processes.
So we really do have a problem of how the world perceives influenza, and it's going to be very difficult to change that unless you do it from within and say, I don't care what your perception is, we're going to address the problem.
But it is not too crazy to think that an outbreak of a novel avian virus could occur in China somewhere.
Ultimately, the mRNA vaccines are an example for that cell and gene therapy. I always like to say, if we had surveyed 2 years ago in the public, would you be willing to take gene or cell therapy and inject it into your body, we would have probably had a 95% refusal rate.
We also face a new threat that the next epidemic has a good chance of originating on a computer screen of a terrorist intent on using genetic engineering to create a synthetic version of the smallpox virus or a contagious and highly deadly strain of flu.
But we're only looking at viral families that include those that have gone into people from animals. So we narrow it down straight away. Then when you get a sequence of a virus and it looks like a relative of a known nasty pathogen, just like we did with SARS, we found other coronaviruses in bats, a whole host of them. Some of them looked very similar to SARS. So we sequenced the spike protein, the protein that attaches to cells. Then I didn't do this work, but my colleagues in China did the work. You create pseudoparticles, you insert the spike proteins from those viruses, see if they bind to human cells.
The shape of the coronavirus spike protein before the virus meets our cells is what triggers the most protective antibody response. So Keith must make the spike protein in the lab, locking it into exactly the same shape by adding another protein that acts a bit like a clamp. And that protein is a tiny fragment of HIV.
So you narrow down the field, you reduce the cost, and you end up with a small number of viruses that really do look like killers.
Really distinguish between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated.
Kayo, magpabakuna kayo o ipakulong ko kayo sa silda.
At this stage, the greatest incentive is freedom.
This becomes absolutely a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
In terms of the number of people in hospital who've been double vaccinated, we know it's around 60% of the people being admitted to hospital with COVID have been double vaccinated.
It doesn't protect you against catching the disease, and it doesn't protect you against passing it on. So now is the time to get your booster.
We need to find a solution that makes it easy for people to get. And I think this solution, it is the number one priority is to have a vaccine that lasts a year. So once people know that it is once a year, I do it every autumn, for example, fall, I think that will improve the amount of people that are getting the vaccine.
We need to get used to being vaccinated with COVID vaccines for the future, and this will be a regular cycle of vaccination and revaccination.
You know, when you look around the world at some of the best practice on this, it's very, very clear that in the end, it's not just going to be something that government does. The consumer, the citizen, has also got a voice in this.
Can you talk about the two people who sadly died taking AstraZeneca, and would you be worried if one of those people, as I understand it, or the family claims wasn't fully informed of the symptoms to look out for?
Well, we're all responsible for our own health. And when it comes to informed consent and giving consent to whatever treatment or procedure you may have or I may have, then I'm ultimately responsible for what people do in their health treatment to me. People make their own decisions about their own health and their own bodies. That's why we don't have mandatory vaccination in relation to the general population here, because people make their own decisions.
But you don't have a choice. People act like you have a choice. Normalcy only returns when we've largely vaccinated the entire global population.
I want to be straight with you. There will be no return to the old normal for the foreseeable future. I repeat, there will be no return to the old normal for the foreseeable future.
So people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again in how we are used to normal, in the old fashion. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen.
A vaccine on its own will not end the pandemic.
That is, if you vaccinate someone and they make an antibody response and then they get exposed and infected, does the response that you induce actually enhance the infection and make it worse? And the only way you'll know that is if you do an extended study, not in a normal volunteer who has no risk of infection, but in people who are out there in a risk situation.
We've now essentially clinically tested the vaccine on billions of people worldwide.
This would not be the first time, if it happened, that a vaccine that looked good in initial safety actually made people worse. There was the history of the respiratory syncytial virus vaccine in children, which paradoxically made the children worse.
Cases of myocarditis or pericarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle, and pericarditis, the inflammation of the membrane surrounding the heart, following COVID-19 vaccination have been reported.
The reason for his collapse is unknown.
The reason why Manny collapsed in the first place still isn't known.
So you might be wondering how someone in such great shape could suffer cardiac arrest.
It's just one of those tragedies.
USC wants to attack, but you've got to be careful. He collapsed. He collapsed.
We have a player down.
Something happened to one of the referees.
We know that we haven't infected enough of the population with this virus.
So we, we'll have to prepare for the next one. That, I'd say is, will get attention this time.
Say, okay, what if a bioterrorist brought smallpox to 10 airports?
Okay, Gabe, as if we don't have enough to worry about. Now we're hearing about the arrival of this other viral disease. It's called monkeypox.
The number of confirmed or suspected cases of monkeypox worldwide is now 106.
What the heck is monkeypox, and do we actually need to worry about this?
Monkeypox को लेकर यूरोप में हाई अलर्ट जारी किया गया है. अमेरिका तक पहुंचा monkeypox का कहर.
And in fact, the questions right now, Ankita, are what is this disease and why should we in India worry?
A very rare virus to find outside West Africa, but what we've seen in the last couple of weeks is that more cases have occurred than has been the case historically for a long, long time.
I don't know how it will play out in November, but what we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed, and particularly also people in the grey economy, which are not counted for, who lose their jobs. So we will see definitively a lot of anger already now, but probably increased by the end of the year, because this crisis will be with us until we really have found a remedy. So we have to prepare for a more angry world.
The consequences on human rights that will come not only in Ukraine and Russia, in the neighborhood, but also in the rest of the world, due to the social and economic consequences that will come due to the high level prices of the wheat, of the oil, of the fertilizers, the inflation that we've already been seeing in many parts of the world, that will mean that many people will have famine, food insecurity, and probably other bigger problems that will lead also to social unrest. So we feel that this year will be a very difficult year for whole humanity.
What do you see as the biggest challenges in conservation?
The growing human population.
Now we see the creation of a new massive class of useless people. As computers become better and better in more and more fields, there is a distinct possibility that computers will outperform us in most tasks and will make humans redundant. And then the big political and economic question of the 21st century will be, what do we need humans for? Or at least, what do we need so many humans for? And again, I think that the biggest question maybe in economics and politics of the coming decades will be what to do with all these useless people.
You brought up some issues that others are reluctant to bring up.
Always. All the religious groups are against me because I'm talking about population. They want more souls. I want less on the planet.
Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra. But let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
I think that is really fulfilling of a dream that we had together with my leadership team when we started in 19. The first week we met in January of 19 in California, and to set up the goals for the next 5 years. And one of them was by 2023, we will reduce the number of people in the world by 50%. I think today this dream is becoming reality.
The good news is the elite across the world trust each other more and more. The bad news is that in every single country they were polling, the majority of people trusted that elite less.
More and more people around the world realize what's really going on, and they hear about the meetings happening in Davos and Geneva, and this week the Bilderberg meeting in Washington, D.C. They decide that they're not okay with being told by the world elite, yes, we're meeting in secret, yes, our plan is depopulation, yes, we plan on imposing this regardless of your democratic laws, and you will submit to our world control. And that's a good thing because we love you. Like, they're not falling for that anymore. People are waking up to this.